Afternoon. We have a single subject press briefing today from the Commander-in-Chief, U.S. Atlantic Command, General John J. Sheehan, who is not unknown to all of you, of course. Subject will be Cooperative Osprey 96. And to remind you also that at 2:30, we'll have a second press briefing today when the Commandant of the Marine Corps will announce an initiative improving the way the Corps makes and sustains Marines. Sir?
Good to see you here. Welcome back. What I'd like to do is kind of go over Cooperative Osprey. This is a great opportunity for the Pentagon Press to come to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina in August. I know a number of you have always been looking for the opportunity to come down there. This is a great opportunity. It should be about 92 degrees, about 95% humidity, and we have an extra supply of bugs this year. So I just want to make sure everyone has the opportunity to come on down. Take the chart down. What we're going to do is just walk through this thing. It's a partnership of peace exercise. It is 16 different partnership of peace nations, 3 NATO nations, and as you know from those that had the opportunity to go to Cooperative Osprey, Cooperative Nugget, I should say, at Fort Polk, Louisiana last year, it's very similar, except it's a little bit more sophisticated in terms of what we're going to expose the partnership of peace nations to. It's going to be at Camp Lejeune, 12th of August to the 30th of August of this year. What we're going to do is expose the Partnership of Peace nations to a level of sophistication that we have not exposed them in the past. For example, we're going to put them aboard ship. We're going to let them fly helicopters into the beach, use LCACs, use Harriers, use those types of platforms that would expect to see in a peacekeeping operation. We've taken many of the lessons learned from Bosnia, included those in the training package. We're going to train them to NATO standards, and in addition to the normal kinds of things you see in peacekeeping operations. Next chart. Those are the countries, starting with Albania all the way down to Uzbekistan. Many of these nations are already participating in other peacekeeping operations or partnership of peace type activities. In the 3 NATO nations that you see are Canada, the U.S., and the Netherlands. The U.S. and the Netherlands will provide the Marines, and since this is a maritime environment, the Canadians are Canadian regular land forces. Observers, as indicated on the bottom of the chart. Those are the primary people who will be attending. This is about 900 troops from the partner nations and about 300 to 400 U.S. troops principally involved in the exercise. That does not count the support troops who are at Camp Lejeune running mess halls, base camps, and all those kinds of things. What they're going to do, as I said before, the context of the operations is Bosnia type, combat operations, but within a humanitarian and a peacekeeping environment. They'll do the normal recovery of downed airmen. They will do secure areas in the urban environment that exist in Camp Lejeune in the sense that the combat training town that we built there that's instrumented. They will go through all those types of trainings. There's 6 different stations that they will go through, and then they'll clearly go through the whole business of moving from an amphibious environment or maritime operation into the partnership peace area, in addition to the normal cultural activity that we expose them to when they're in the United States. That's the last chart. And so what I'd like to do is answer questions. Please.
Was Russia invited?
Russia was invited.
Oh, well, they declined. Did they give a reason for that?
Russia, for some reason, I was in Moscow about 2 months ago visiting the general staff, and they have a very fixed scheduling process. In this particular exercise, did not make the schedule.
Are you in the process of, you've got most of the partnership members there, are you evaluating them individually as potential NATO members in the process of this?
We trained a standard. Last year, for example, at Fort Polk, Louisiana, I sent to each of the chiefs of defense and chiefs of service a written evaluation of the performance of the platoon that attended the training. We will do exactly the same thing again this year. We have established and pre-briefed the countries as to what the NATO standards are. These are not report cards in the pass-fail kinds of approach, but rather these are the kinds of things that the nations need to improve on in order to reach interoperable standards. What we've found out, and part of the reason we raised this threshold this year, is that over the last year and a half or so, the quality of the training and the quality of the people that they send to the partnership peace exercise is improving. So what we're trying to do is keep moving this so that they're absolutely interoperable. And they've done very well, as for example, in Bosnia, for example. And so I think what we're trying to do is keep raising these standards to improve the quality of their training.
Why observer status? Why didn't those countries actually participate?
Each country makes a decision as to what it wants to do. Some cases, because their troops are committed to other types of activity, they will send observers. So each country has an election in terms of how it wants to participate, and that's up to the individual country. We just finished, for example, a large exercise in the Black Sea with the Romanians, and so some of these countries, again, have elected to just do it in observer status. I think part of it is because they're not quite sure what a maritime environment looks like, and they didn't feel as though that it was appropriate for their troops, so they just want to come and watch.
How much will it cost, and who will pay for it?
The cost is about $8.5 million. Much of the funding is coming from non-LUGAR type money. It's coming from our training budget. The vast majority of that expense is the airlift cost to fly to 16 different nations to pick up people and bring them to the United States. The countries themselves will absorb the O&M costs for the preparation for their troops and all those types of costs associated prior to the departure, ammunition costs, etc. We will pay transportation and housing costs in the United States.
What cultural activities are planned for that?
Normal kinds of things. We're going to bring them to Washington, D.C. to give an opportunity to see what the decision cycle is up here. Take them to the Air and Space Museum, take them to the beach in North Carolina, take them to the various places like King's Dominion, etc.
Technical aspects of roller coasters. What's the largest contingent? How do they break down?
They all run about 40 to 50 people. It's a basic platoon. They will send support personnel, whether it's a chaplain, whether it's a doctor. Each will also send a couple of observers. These are usually colonels or generals. And what we're going to do with the observers is take them to our JTAS, Joint Training Analysis and Simulation Center. We will teach them staff planning procedures, because at the end of this evolution, we're going to put them all in the field for a field training exercise. And again, as part of this upgrade to the training, they'll actually function as operations officers, logistics officers, in hopes that we'll raise the level of their experience in training.
General, you said you wrote an evaluation on last year's exercise, and you know Congress is trying to speed up the process of including new members in NATO. What's your judgment of how ready are those nations to join a full partner?
There's a couple different dimensions associated with NATO inclusion. What we're doing in the Partnership for Peace program is what I call tactical and operational activity. In order for a nation to participate and become part of the membership of NATO, there has to be transparencies in certain kinds of defense budget activities. There has to be civilian oversight of the military, all the kind of the constructs that have been outlined in the NATO communique. We don't evaluate that part of the process. That's why when the enlargement process takes place, it's up to each individual nation, the applying nation and the member 16 nations, to kind of vote on whether NATO is in fact enlarged and what process they do, what countries are included in that process. We do not do that evaluation.
Operationally and tactically, how are
they're very, very good. There are clearly grades of being very good, but in every instance, I would say that they're quite capable. We have learned a great deal from some of them because peacekeeping operations is conducted very differently in different parts of the world, but I think on average, I'd be willing to go somewhere with most of these troops.
Spanning the gaps on technology, particularly communications.
We provide to those countries that don't have the communications frequency sets that are compatible with the U.S. Communications that assist them during the process. But that's one of the interoperability standards that we identified to NATO, that as we move towards this enlargement process, the countries that become part of NATO have got to have the same compatible communications gear.
Some of the exercises you discussed are essentially what I call, quote, water operations. The pilots in the water, amphibious landings, and yet many of the nations that are participating are landlocked nations. Do you have any exercises essentially for what I call, quote, land operations?
Well, first off, the downed pilot syndrome is not a water operation. This is not recovery while it's at sea. This is a recovery over land. and the urban environment is in a land context. So those training principles are applicable whether you're coming from the sea or whether you're in fact on a continentalist basis. The reason that we're trying to expose the partner nations to this type of a context is just the very demographics of what's happening in the world. 5 to 10 years from now, depending on which demographic figures you look at, about 70 to 75% of the world's population is going to be within 100 plus miles of the coast, plus the urbanization that's taking place in large cities. And so any peacekeeping operation that you're talking about in most parts of the world in the future are going to be on and near the coast. And so just the fact that you are in a landlocked country doesn't preclude you from participating in this type of activity. And so what it is just an experimentation process, an exposure process that gives them the opportunity to see these kinds of activities.
Is there any sort of equipment that you've purchased to make this exercise happen, or is this all from within?
This is all from within the DoD inventory.
Speaking of training, if I could ask you about the contingency training in Haiti and what the impetus for that was. Is the situation in Haiti very dire right now?
No, this was always a planned activity. First off, we practice for most of the forces that we have under USACOM, which is about 80% of the combat capability of the United States. About once a month, we pack up an organization. In this particular case, it was the reinforced company, and we sent them to Haiti. We do that in different parts of the United States. We will do it in the Marines in the not too distant future, partially because we're the response force for whatever happens. Haiti happens to be an excellent training environment. It's one of those kinds of places where you can send people. We discussed this with President Proval and the American ambassador. They're basically down there for a week. They're doing urban work, urban training, but they're doing it in support of the U.S. support group that's doing the engineering effort down there. You may know that President Proval is going to open up or cut the ribbon to start the construction of a road tomorrow, which is attempting to open up Cité Soleil. We'll start outside, about 5 miles outside the city, and so the Seabees are down there, and so we're just doing basic training.
Could you say which U.S. units will be working with this group in the exercise?
Which U.S. units? The Marines, the U.S. Marines from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, the Dutch Marines, and the Canadian forces.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great time. See you at Camp Lejeune.
You're going to have a flight?
Yep.